Hey there, friends. Hello. Welcome to another Whiskey Me live tasting. I hope you've got your drams at the ready. Here's my little patch of Jura 18-year-old, and I hope you've resisted cracking into it and enjoying it already. Well, obviously I haven't. But even if you have enjoyed a little bit, perhaps you've saved some for our very special tasting tonight. Well, I say very special. It's a similar standard and normality to the rest of the tastings we do. Although I have to say, our guest tonight is a formidable character in the world of whiskey and a very close friend of mine. I'm going to introduce him now. It's Mr. Daryl Haldane from Whyte Mackay, who are the owners of Jura Distillery, in case you're wondering the connection. Here he comes, straight in from Edinburgh.
Here we go, mate.
Yeah.
How are you? How you doing?
Yeah, how you doing?
I'm all right, man. I'm all right.
We're just saying the same things as each other.
I'm not happy with that introduction.
Should we start again?
Yeah,
it's not live.
Yeah, I know that. Well, just as well. Yeah, it's good to see you. Good to see you, mate. Thanks very much for having Jura 18 on Whiskey Me. It's a brilliant drop, and I totally disagree with everything you've said there. It's a great whiskey. We've got lots of brilliant stuff to say. It's not just another tasting, definitely. A Jura 18 on a Tuesday night is not bad going, I would say, in my book.
It's not at all, is it? And you know what? It's always exciting when we get to feature whiskies with which sort of the number is in the late teens. And although we're always very keen to state that age isn't everything in whiskey, it's exciting when you get up to this kind of age statement, I think, because
I totally agree. There's a sweet spot in everything, isn't there? You know, you talk about a sports person, whatever sport it is, you run, I don't do anything. People play football, people play rugby, people have a peak, and there's and it generally sort of sits at around the same kind of point. But different sports have different kind of times when people can peak, and I think whiskey is very much like that. And certain distilleries, I think, peak at around this kind of 18 to 21-year-old, and Jura is definitely one of those from my experience. The whiskies that I've tasted from Jura in the past, it does actually do quite well, quite young. But at that 18 to 21, I think it really comes into its own. It almost develops that complexity that you're looking for. But all the good stuff, like Captain Planet, you know, all their powers combined create this thing that are just absolutely magical. And for that sort of 3 or 4 year period, for me, they really, really do come to life. And every distillery is different. I always think of Talisker, and my favourite Taliskers were 57 North, with the old 8-year-old. They do so well so young because the pepper and that little hint of oak and sweetness and stuff all just does so well at that younger age. For Jura here, I would definitely say 18 to kind of 21 is a really, really nice part of the sort of flavour profile development of this distillery.
Yeah, sure. Because it's all about that balance between the maturation character and the distillery character. And obviously, the more time goes on, the more that maturation character begins to overwhelm. And although you can get super tasty whiskies well into the 20s, you lose so much of the core of that distillery's expression, and everything starts to become, you know, a little bit like the same, you know, and it becomes harder to identify what makes that distillery, you know, stand out when it was a younger whiskey. And I think you're absolutely spot on. For certain distilleries like Jura, anything from that sort of late teens up to early 20s is where it really starts to shine.
Yeah. It's funny you say that the distillery character, you do have to be careful, don't you? Because sometimes you can create a really light spirit style. And then when you get older and the types of casks you use and things like that, you do have to watch them. Make sure they don't become, you know, too academic. You know, they become too much about, you know, time and wood. You need that youth and vibrancy that spirit gives you to make sure you have that balance. And with Jura, we have to be careful because, I don't know if you know this, you've been to Jura. Yeah. So tall stills, you know, really tall. Amongst the tallest in the industry, probably third or fourth, something like that. Really do create that lovely, light, vibrant style of spirit. That over time, you know, you need to manage that really carefully. You need to watch, you don't hammer it too much with oak, and you need to make sure that time also doesn't, you know, destroy that vibrancy that you have in the spirit. So yeah, always with light spirits. Glenmorangie would be the same, very tall stills, very light spirit. You have to be careful with time in those. So, you know, every distillery, again, similar to what we're saying about when they peak, you also have to be careful as well. It's just that, you know, what you're working with. Remember what you're working with. This light, vibrant spirit style over time, the wood can dominate it very quickly. So you have to use the right casks and make sure you move them through the cask at the right times.
It's mad, isn't it? I mean, you think about these casks as this sort of flavor-giving devices, obviously originally for storage, but now there to impart this characteristic synonymous with whiskey. And then we think about the spirit going in there, but of course that's of, an organic nature in itself. It's made from malted barley and yeast, and it's fermented, it's distilled, and put through these stills and select the specific cut is selected for its, clarity of flavor or whatever. But all of this is just a combination of ingredients grown out of the ground, and then through this kind of alchemy mixed together to try and make the best expression of both of those things. Yeah,
that's it. And timing, right? Why does it taste the way it tastes? And it's not all just down to the ingredients. Interesting thing about Jura particularly is it's a small population, and it has been a reasonably small population for a long period of time. It's quite hard to get to as well, so that makes it less appealing, right? So to people go there, they visit, and they don't often stay and build a house or buy a house or whatever. So there's 212 people that live on Jura right now. It's actually probably about 215, 218, something like that. It's gone up slightly since we did the last census, shall we say. But in the past, this distilling would have happened in many places across the island, on farms and things like that, mostly illegal. But what you must remember is that the whiskies that were produced on Jura back in the day probably were quite smoky, would have been quite heavy, oily. It's the perfect place for making whiskey if you think about it. It's in between Campbelltown and Islay. I mean, they're historically, it's the sandwich, of whiskey history. Victorian distilling in Scotland, in the UK, was centred around this nuke of the United Kingdom. It was really, really important. So there was tons of stuff going on. But actually, the distillery closed in 1901. And the Jura distillery back then was known as the Small Isles Bay, or the Small Isles Distillery. And Small Isles Bay is the bay that sits right in front of the distillery itself. It closed in 1901. The Fergusons took their bits and pieces away from the island and back to Glasgow. And it wasn't really until 1963 when the spirit starts to run off the stills at the Jura distillery. So the situation had changed enormously, because the blenders of the day in the 60s and whiskey, let's face it, malt whiskey distilleries existed back then to provide the blends with whiskey that they could then share with the world. And the blends of the day were lighter blends, fruity blends, and Jura, when it re-established distilling on the island, it really had to make a light, fruity, easygoing style of single malt whiskey to contribute to those blends that were J&B, Cutty Sark, these types of whiskies that were going around at that point in time.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you say, it's the filling of a sandwich. The top piece of bread being very smoky flavored, the bottom piece being full of Campbelltown, this is being full of flavor and sort of, industrial, mechanical and hard working. And then in the middle, suddenly you've got this new Jura, which is like your kind of light, milder, cheddar filling. That makes it sound really boring, but
yeah. I love the analogy. It's very good. Yeah.
You started it with the sandwich thing. I
don't know what I was thinking about, man. So that's a good. Let's stop talking about sandwiches and let's start talking about some whiskey, shall we? I'm going to pour myself. Yeah, you've got yours good to go. All right. I'm getting my 18 out. So there's been a lot of changes. I know a lot of your subscribers will remember Jura from Jura Origin, the 10-year-old, Superstition and Philosophy, Prophecy, no philosophy. And Prophecy was very smoky, Superstition was in the middle, and Origin had no smoke. The whiskies we produce today are much more like Origin. We have a tiny pinch of smoke, very, very subtle. And we almost use our smoky stock as seasoning. So if you could imagine cooking a steak, you want to add a little bit of salt and pepper just to let the flavors of the meat sing. That's how we use smoke. So we do have little parcels of casks and we literally just sprinkle them in and that's it. Okay, so it's not about smoke at all. It's about balance of flavor. It's about this lovely vibrancy and liveliness that we get off our spirits. And then over time, with American oak initially, it would build up the flavor profile. And with certain products, we'll develop that even further with some enhancement casks. So the Jura 18 that we are enjoying this evening is predominantly American oak, ex-bourbon barrels. It spends most of its life in those. And then for around 24 months, it'll go into these lovely French red wine casks. And that's really just to pick up this kind of layer of, we'll go back to jam, it's about that fruitiness. It's a little bit of chocolate. And for me, it's a little bit more like dark chocolate than it is milk chocolate. You get a little bit of licorice, a little bit of spice in there as well. And for those of you who were brought up in the 90s on Black Forest Gateaus, for me, this is what this is all about. You know, it's so good. It's a terrible explanation.
I think we might have even put Black Forest Gateau on the tasting card this month, because it is, like you say, a combination of those things. If you think like sort of creamy and then that dark fruit and that chocolate and, you know, I would say a little bit of coffee in there. Not that you have coffee in a Black Forest Gateau, but maybe you ordered a coffee when your dessert came. I don't know. You know, it's all those kind of things combined. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really is, and it's good that you say kind of creamy. There's a bit here with the 18 that moves on to these red fruits, dark chocolates, even coffees and things like that. That's the way it goes as it gets older. You know, if I look at the 10-year-old or Jura Journey, we do get a lot more of that creaminess, and we get that. What I remember that we used to get in Jura Origin and the 16-year-old Jura Own, some of the subscribers might know that there's a peach melba character in Jura that I pick up very regularly, a lot in the old bottlings, but in our younger whiskies, I also pick it up quite often as well. And I'm a massive fan of that. It's like, it is the kind of flavor it's sort of, you know, very nostalgic. It's a delicious flavor profile, creaminess in whiskies I like a lot, you know, when you get that kind of creme brulee thing going on, but when you've got that little bit of fresh or canned fruit in there as well, it just works really, really well. We don't have as much of that here in the 18.
Yeah, I was going to say, peach melba is something that I'm quite sensitive to in whiskey as well, actually, but I find I pick up it a lot in Irish whiskey.
Yeah, I would agree.
From like cork distillers, like it comes through a lot for me in a lot of their products, and it's quite pleasant. It's a nice thing to find, you know.
No, I'm a massive fan of it. But we don't get as much of that peachiness in here, but you get creaminess, but then it moves into dark fruits, red fruits and dark chocolates and coffees and things like that. But it's a great dram. But, you know, when we relaunched the Jura distillery, really, about 4.5 years ago, whenever it was, this one really, really stood out for me. It gave me a lot of confidence that we were doing the right thing. Because I did feel at the younger age, I think Jura's really vibrant, it's good, it works. I wanted to make sure, you know, when we were tasting these whiskies, that when we were going out and sharing it with the world, that we had a kind of landmark whiskey here that, you know, people could go to and go, do you know what? That's made me rethink about what that Jura distillery is all about. Great whiskey. It's at a great price point, to be honest, as well. It's well under 100 quid. It's probably about 85 quid a bottle or something like that. And flavour profile-wise, it does tick all those boxes. It dances around the house style. You know kind of what you're expecting from these Juras now, but it gives you a little bit more than that as well. And it does. It's a flavour-wise, I think it just delivers so much.
Yeah. No, I remember when you did the relaunch, because we hosted the event down in Blackrock in London. I remember doing the comparative tasting on all of them, and 18 was the one that stood out for me as well. And often when I do tastings like that, I don't want it to be the 18 that stands out, like the high age statement one, and all that kind of thing. It seems so obvious, but, you know, we tasted it and we were like, this is damn good whiskey, you know?
Do you know, and that's all you can ask for. So when we bring people over to the island, and we'll talk about the island in a minute, I'm sure, you know, there's hundreds of stories we could share from the island, but when we take people over to Jura itself, you know, you get into the cooperage. We've got a bar set up in the old cooperage, and just to sit by the bar and at the end of a day or work or whatever it's been, you maybe been out on a boat or something like that, you get back in there, it's these thick walls, stone floors, pretty exposed. You sit there and you have something like this and you just, everything just stops. Everything just gets a little bit slower, you know, and you take that flavor in and you really appreciate it. And when you're there on the island, I mean, it always tastes better, doesn't it? It's like anything.
Yeah.
You go to the place it comes from. Yeah.
It is a beautiful island. I mean, as I say, as we said, I've been there once with you. And I remember it just having a kind of magical feel to it. It might be on account of the fact there's basically no one there. But it was so serene on the harbour there. I mean, you know, really, is it Craig House, the main kind of town? Everything's so sort of centred around that little area, and you know, besides that, you've basically just got a big long road and the odd sort of house here and there, haven't you? It's so deserted.
It's really special. It is. It's because I've spent a lot of time over there now over the years, and I love it. You know, we always talk about it. It's one road, one pub. You know, one. There's actually 2 distilleries now. One whiskey distillery, and our friends in the north tip of the island, they've got a gin distillery called Lusser Gin, which is fabulous. So yeah, and as you go up the island, up to the top of the island, you go right up to the North Estate, which is Barn Hill, which of course where George Orwell finished writing 1984, and I think actually it's one of these places where if you're a writer, an artist, you'll appreciate this. You are a writer, you love running, all of that stuff. What a great place to spend time. And the thing that really always catches me off guard is how beautiful it is. And I love Islay, and people are going to probably hammer me for this. Islay's lovely, but to look at, it's a bit, apart from the beaches, it's a bit dull. Yeah. And apologies if anyone's offended by that observation. Feel free to talk about Fife in a derogatory way. That's absolutely acceptable as well. You can get me back.
Right. There's not a lot of beautiful landscape on Islay. It's very flat, isn't it? Like, you know, there's nothing epic about it. It's the distilleries is what makes it, really, you know.
And the people and the hospitality and stuff on Islay is incredible, right? But when you get to Portiskeag and you take the wee ferry over, which goes sideways because the sound of Islay is so powerful, you get over there and you're just like, what's going on here? You see the paps. You drive around to Craighouse and you see the deer, and they're in the winter months they come right down. There's about 5,000 or 6,000 deer on Jura itself. And Jura literally means Deer Island. It's what it translates to in Old Norse. So, and as you go around to Craighouse itself, just as you come down between the distillery and the pub or the hotel, you're greeted by the Small Isles Bay, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And the number of times I've gone down there on a rainy day, a snowy day, a sunny day, and I just get my camera out and I'm just like, this is so beautiful. It's just, again, it's beautiful, but it's different from the last time I was there. As a great photographer, that, you know, if you guys are looking to see what Jura looks like and its best and its worst and all of that, a guy called Conrad Barkowski, he's a photographer who lives on Jura. And he takes time lapses and everything almost all the time of the sunsets and the sunrises and things like that. And it's just amazing. I remember one time we were down we're at the distillery. We'd been in the cooperage the night before, actually, and had a few whiskies, of course. Woke up in the morning, and you've got to do that just to kind of blow the cobwebs off and get the redness out of my eyes. Yeah. Just to wake up, exactly. And dolphins in the Small Isles Bay, right up close, you know, and the deer can be right in front of the hotel, just on the grass, just munching away. And so, I mean, it just really catches you off guard sometimes. Really, really, really beautiful. And then there's also, you know, of course, the natural beauty, but there's also the community aspect. And well, only 212 or so people living there. Really surprised me how few are born there and brought up there. I think it's probably less than 50-50 people born and bred on Jura. Yeah. And there's a lot of people that have fallen in love with it, understandably. They've gone in and they've had an amazing time, and they've thought, could we live on an island, you know? And I remember years ago, I always used to think about it when I used to go to Orkney. I used to think about it all the time. I never said it out loud, you know, and because I didn't want to like set the wheels in motion, because I was always a bit scared of like making a leap like that, and I never did it. But a good friend of mine, a guy called Mark, who works at the distillery, Mark Bruce, he lives there, and he moved there from London, an Aussie guy who'd lived in London, done all sorts of stuff, and he fell in love with it. He came over with us for a few days. He spent time, met loads of the locals, and he made the move. And what was amazing about Mark's story is Estelle, his partner, she's a copywriter, and she'd never been to Jura before. And he managed to convince her to move from London to Jura, having never been there before. And, you know, he was leaving a sales job to go and work at the distillery. And I was like, man, I'm not convinced, but I think you should have stayed in sales. You're obviously very good at it, you know. He's absolutely sold the dream there to his partner, Estelle. But they're still there, you know. They moved in November, just before the pandemic, and still there today. So if they're watching, cheers to those guys. They've joined the community there on the island and become a massive part of it. And what's always kind of caught me off guard is just how close you can get to people very quickly over there. You know, the Nicole that drives the ferry, you've got Andy and Kath that run the pub, and all the people that you bump into just in the pub and the restaurant, at the shops and things like that. The banter that you have with people, I can see how easily people could just fall in love and go, that's where I want to be, you know. Good sense of humor as well, Tristan. So, you know, what little things. I remember Stevie Martin, one of my colleagues, that he actually works on Jura as well. He'd gone over to Jura for the first time, and he was standing in the shop, and the shopkeeper was dealing with a customer, and the customer had asked for a newspaper. And the shopkeeper responds to him. He's like, yeah, absolutely, no problem. Do you want yesterday's or today's paper? And the kind of guy kind of looks at him and goes, oh, well, I'll have today's paper. He's like, oh, brilliant, fantastic. Come back tomorrow then. so it's, you know, it's so good. And it gives you an example of like the island time. If the weather's terrible, look, stuff's just not coming over. You're going to have to be pretty self-sufficient. I remember the Beast from the East. Oh, that was a nightmare. You know, people were stuck there for quite a while. So, you know, there's things like that. The attitude is brilliant. Very open, fun, and very interested in having people over. You know, they're really open with that.
You're right. Don't expect to get Amazon Prime deliveries next day, right?
Yeah, definitely not. No.
But it's a shame. It's the shame there's no direct ferry service, really. Why isn't there? I mean, like,
there is. There is. Yeah, there is a direct. There is. Yeah, but you can't put your car on it. So it's Nicole that runs the Jura ferry. So what you do is you drive to Tayvallic, and from Tayvallic you get the smaller ferry direct over. Do you know, it's a great way to do it. Personally, I love it because, well, I love boats. And you come by the beautiful lighthouse, and it's about an hour crossing. Tayvallic itself is amazing, beautiful little place, great cafe. Get yourself a nice roll before you get on the boat and head off. But a great way to do it is to get to Tayvallic and take your bike in the car, leave your car there, and then get your bike on the boat. And when you get to Jura, you can just cycle out, you know, go. It's about 30 miles long, so you can cycle right the way up. I mean, it's a decent, you know, you'd put some miles in if you did it that way. And then, of course, when you're there, you can go up the Paps, the 3 Paps of Jura. Those are fantastic, conical-shaped mountains that dominate the skyline in that part of the world, you know. And you could spend some time up there. I mean, of course, a full day anyway, getting up those 3 and back. Yeah.
I need to get over and do that Jura fell race at some point, because there's I think it's 30 kilometers all the way up all 3 Paps and back round to Craig House. Need to do it. Yeah,
mate. Well, look, we'll sponsor you all day, bro. We'll keep you refreshed. Yeah.
Well, definitely refreshments at the end. That would be good.
There's as much Jura 18 in that Cooperage bar as you need, mate. That's absolutely fine. Yeah. Is this recorded? Are you holding me to that? Yeah.
Exactly. This is why I'm propositioning it on a live tasting, because not only is it recorded, but there are approximately 40 people listening right now. So
yeah. So on that, right? So 30K. I'm not sure what the altitude is. You probably had a look at it. I think the guys do it in, I want to say 5 hours, 5.5 hours, something like that.
I think it's less than that. Yeah, I think it's even
less. It less than that, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. I think the course record is, they're fast. They're fast for sure. But it's not. I don't think there's that many people enter it. It's not like a huge race. Yeah, I don't. Do you know what time of year it is?
It's in May. So it's the weekend. I think it's the weekend before Fejao or the weekend after Fejao. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
We'll make it happen anyway. Cool. Yeah. So it's you know, I've been getting a little bit of Fisherman's Friends off it.
Right, okay.
Spicy, mentally, like, you know, funk. It's really tasty.
So yeah, we're 18 years old with this one, right? So it's spending most of its life in American oak. The red wine, there's quite a few examples of Jura in red wine from the past. And years ago, we used to always do so. Fèis Isle is the Islay Whisky Festival. Jura is part of Fèis Isle. It takes one of the days, and usually it shares it with one of the other distilleries. So it could be Kilchoman one year, it could be Bunnahabhain one year, it just sort of changes. So we always used to do a release, and it was called a tasteable bottling in the past. And the tasteable bottlings, there are, I think it goes back maybe to 2010 or 2011, something like that. But there are quite a few examples of tasteable bottlings with red wine cask finishes and different types of red wines. There's been specific Pinot Noirs, Cabernet Sauvignons and things like that. And here we have some lovely, these are Premier Grand Cru Barriques. So these are Bordeaux wines. And they do bring that lovely kind of red fruit quality to them. A little bit of spice in there. There's no doubt about it. I often pick it up as licorice, so kind of like a sweet spice. But I can see what you're saying with Fisherman's Friends. I do totally
or even like
that,
cinnamon or that kind of thing, cloves. Yeah, it's, and the thing is, these sort of aromas and characteristics can manifest as different things at different times of the day, or like based on what you had to eat just now, or what you drank beforehand, or if you're in a bad mood or a good mood or whatever. It's so subjective. This is why when we do tasting notes on the pouch, I'm always quite conscious of being sort of kind of vague on purpose, because I don't want to try and pin people down to specific flavors, but more like a family of flavors,
Yeah, and I think you've got to give people permission to explore, right? So one of the things, let's get the sorbets out. One of the things I always love to do is to compare, contrast, flavors, temperatures, textures. That's something that everybody can do. You don't need to be a food scientist to figure out what goes well with something. If it works in your mouth, it works for you, right? That's as simple as that. So one of the things that we messed around with when we were working on this 18-year-old was this raspberry sorbet idea. A little bit of dark chocolate. You could even grate ground coffee over the top of the raspberry. So you've got that little twist, sweet, a little bit sour because it's a sorbet. You get that little tanginess, but a little bit bitter in there as well. Is just a really nice complementary sort of flavor profile. So when you have a little bit of that, pop it in your mouth, then have a sip of the whiskey. You've got all sorts of stuff going on. You've got melting, you've got profile flavors, you've got alcohol strength, flavors working together, flavors fighting with one another. There's just tons and tons of stuff going on. And the good thing is, it's a bit of fun. Do you know what I mean? So I'm just going to get my sorbet sorted.
So we've got sorbet here. We've got sorbet here too. I'm going to take the whiskey.
Yeah. Go for it.
We did put out on social media that you may want to find yourself some sorbet, because Daryl sort of pre-warned me that this is kind of one of their recommended serves, raspberry sorbet with the Jura 18. If you don't have any, doesn't matter. Maybe save some, go buy yourself some raspberry sorbet, make some raspberry sorbet, whatever you need to do.
Do it, yeah. Try it at the weekend. And it is really, really nice. Or even if you don't have raspberry sorbet, don't worry about it. Put a raspberry in the freezer and just pop it in your mouth. Let it melt away. So I've got my raspberry sorbet. I'm going to just put a little sprinkle of dark chocolate on the top. I've got the smallest shovel you've ever seen in your life, and I have no idea where this came from. By the way, I don't even know. That's bizarre.
It looks like it's
anyway, raspberry.
From a fancy tea room in a hotel or something like that.
Something like that. That sounds like me. To be fair, you know me too well, Tristan. So sorbet. I've gone for like 70% cocoa chocolate. Just dusted that on top. Really grated it on top. Really nice. And go back and forward. And I do think that there are whiskies for all times of the day. And I'm a massive fan of, before dinner, I love a whiskey on ice. A big rock or just tons of cubes, a Jura Journey, something light, refreshing, easygoing whiskey. That's my kind of aperitif. An 18-year-old, I'm probably not going to have at that time of the day. I'll probably wait till just after dinner. And that's why, with a little bit of sorbet or something like that, an espresso even on the side of this would be delicious. Just a nice way to enjoy a post-dinner whiskey, something after lunch or after dinner.
Like cocktails, right? All you're doing is you're taking some of the characteristics of the spirit and sort of pulling them out and going, right, here's that kind of red wine cask thing. So there's the raspberry.
Yeah.
Here's the the sort of chocolate elements of the barrel. So there's the cocoa over the top or the coffee over the top. And it's fun, isn't it? Because it just sort of accentuates some of those characteristics. And it's like playing with the flavor profile of the whiskey a little bit, kind of plucking little bits out. So you go, oh, yeah. And it's fun to also especially introduce sweetness as well, because then you're sort of softening some of the characteristics of the heat of the whiskey and kind of experiencing it, with almost like in a liqueur form, and there's so many ways to enjoy whiskey beyond, it's wonderful to drink it neat. It's wonderful to drink it, cask strength or unadulterated, but it's so great to try adding water, to try bringing in, outside flavors to see how the whiskey reacts to it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as I said, this is at 44%, Tristan. So the whiskey on its own is fantastic. It's not too strong, but feel free to add a little splash of water. And again, just go back to it, see how it opens up. I do think that, the rules around drinking whiskey and stuff, we talk about these things all the time, but like there aren't really any rules for your whiskey. Drink it how you want. But a little splash of water is lovely. It's a little bit like you go out. It's believe it or not, it's actually been quite sunny here in Scotland today, and things are starting to dry up a little bit. You walk around the woods, you don't get a huge amount on the nose when it's dry like that. As soon as it rains, you smell everything. The grass comes to life. You smell mushrooms. You smell, that moss in the ground. That little bit of water in the woods just helps everything come to life, and you smell absolutely everything. I do find that with whiskey. A little splash of water, stuff just starts happening a little bit more. Really great way just to explore different ideas and different aromas that are in the glass. And with it 44% with this one, so it's a little bit higher. Yeah, I agree, Anthony. It is smooth, it's fudgy, lovely wininess, lovely little bit of sort of grape and berry and red currant, touch of astringency in there as well. Totally agree. Bit of tannic.
Oh, but what's that all about?
What is that? Don't, no. Yeah. Jeez, O'Conan, you'll give me a big head here. Is it? Yeah. But yeah, a little bit of water, I think it works really well.
Yeah, wine gums is definitely, and Earl Grey tea. I'm in agreement with that for sure. For me, it's like woody and winey, and in the wine side of it, it's those darker fruits. It's really lovely.
Yeah, no, it's great. A really, really good representation of what Jura is all about. It's about this beautiful island. It is wild. It is rugged. It's mostly uninhabitable, to be honest. The places where you'll find the houses and things are very close to the waterfront as you move through, but it's an amazing, amazing place. Very focused around the community. It is a small community of around 212 to 220 people, and the whiskey itself is this lovely, lively, bright and vibrant style, and a lot of that's down to what we do in the distillery. Our distillery manager, Graham Logan, it's his job to look after that part, and then once we put these spirit into casks, it's making sure we accentuate those qualities that the guys at the distillery have been working so hard to do. And I think this Jura 18 is a fabulous example of what Jura is all about, to be honest.
Yeah. Right. A couple of questions for you before we finish up. There's the first one. Is the distillery open to the public again? I was there in June, but it was closed.
Yeah. Okay. So the shop is open. The distillery is not open at the moment. The problem is with social distancing, that distillery is really small inside. It's not a big distillery. A lot of people think, Jura is a big brand. Everybody knows the name, and it's tiny, really. It's only a couple of million litres a year, so it's not a big distillery. So it's quite small inside. We're quite restricted, so not open to the public inside the distillery for tours, but pop into the shop, say hi to Mark and Fiona there. They'll look after you, give you a couple of drams, and you can get on your way.
Fantastic. Will we see any more casks being released on the market for the indie bottlers? Don't see a lot of independently bottled Jura, do you?
No, you don't. There is some stuff from probably about 15 years ago, but no, there isn't. The reality is the proprietary bottling is really popular at the moment. Jura's, at the moment there's no need for indie bottlers.
There's no stock for them, basically. Yeah.
There's no stock.
It's popular enough that you don't want to sell it to anyone else. It makes sense.
Yeah, good problem. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Daz, thanks so much for coming on and doing this. And I think based on the comments I'm seeing, everyone appreciates your time and your energy. So and your whiskey as well. It's really fantastic.
Good to hear, man. Good to see you. Slange, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Bye bye.